Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence Podcast, where our purpose is to help create a better future. Learn from our world's experts how to improve your organisation sustainably. Learn how to achieve and sustain an excellence journey for yourself, others, and the planet.
And I'm your host, Brad Jevons, coming to you from Brisbane, Australia. We are proudly brought to you in association with SA Partners, a world-leading business transformation consultancy. SA Partners are a truly purposeful company focused on helping organisations achieve sustainable improvement for themselves, others, and the planet. Welcome to episode 48 of the Enterprise Excellence Podcast. It is such a pleasure to have Ashleigh Morris on the show with us today. Ashleigh has been recognised as one of the world's most influential leaders in corporate social responsibility. Ashleigh has dedicated her career to helping shift organisations to a more sustainable, circular future for generations to come. She is joining us today to share her knowledge on how organisations can move towards becoming more circular. Let's get into the episode. Ashleigh, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. So it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Ashleigh, what's your backstory? Like, what events triggered this direction you have taken in life to helping, organisations create a better future for the planet and others?
Well, trying to take a very long story and make it short. I grew up on a regional farm, actually, on the hinterland of the Sunshine Coast, so a beautiful, idyllic place. I had a strong attachment, of course, then to the natural environment and everything that it provided to us. But I kind of lost my way through my teenage years. I left school and home early and kind of spent quite a few years just getting up to all types of bad things. But I had this long-term desire to really contribute, to really use my life to support the natural environment. And so I actually returned to university. I went to university through a free tertiary preparation pathway, and I got a credit to do a degree, which was environmental health science. And that changed my whole trajectory. There were so many professions that I didn't even know existed that were supporting change in the world. And so when I learned about that and I was in my degree, I learned about this Prime Minister's scholarship. And I actually was the first student at the University of Sunshine Coast to get a scholarship through the Prime Minister's office to travel to Indonesia for 1 year to look at the drivers of waste pollution. Now, that was my first real understanding of how our current economy, which is linear, take, make, waste, was heavily impacting the environment. I was seeing the end of pipe waste for millions of people across Indonesia. So that was a real eye-opening experience for me. And really then when I went to further my studies, because I was really intrigued by what was happening in terms of waste, I went to the University of New South Wales. I studied under laureate Professor Veena Sahajawala. People love Veena, probably know Veena. She's on a lot of TV programs at the moment.
Yeah.
And so she was my honours supervisor. And I was this time looking at electronic waste. Again, a big problematic area. I did a documentary showing for one of our major banks that one of their laptops actually ended up in Ghana and was pulled apart by a 14-year-old. And I did this in conjunction with the ABC. So just a really powerful study, but really showed a major problem systemically. But in that course of that work, I had learned about then the circular economy as this new model. And it was what catalyzed me to just leave what I was doing and change the course of my career to then focus on really trying to solve the problem, not treat the symptoms. And for me, when I was addressing waste and researching waste, I was just putting a Band-Aid on a very big problem. And I didn't want to do that anymore.
Wow. So there's been some real influences on your career, Ashleigh, I can see. You named some really driven, moving people there. And you've also, I guess, seen some shocking things too. It must have been a real shock seeing what you saw in Indonesia to inspire you and fire you forward so much.
Yeah, I went when no Australian goes, because we actually think Bali's Indonesia, but Bali's just one of the 11,000 islands that make up Indonesia as a country. Yeah. So I actually spent that year in Java, which is their most populous island, and I went to. They're not even, I wouldn't classify them as landfills. They are actually just depository points for tons and tons of waste. There are children there picking up through the waste, and of course adults. They run their cattle there, not like our country where we have lovely green pastures where our cattle are run across these mountains of waste. And they're sold, this island is very heavily with Muslim religion, so they sell those cattle at Ramadan. So the material that those cattle were eating was inside the cattle, of course, and then being ingested by people. So there was so many layers of how this was extremely problematic. And it was eye-opening. and not only that, one of the major sites of waste in that country was co-located next to the top of one of their water supplies for a major city. And I tested the leachate, what the liquid that runs out of a waste pile, to see what toxins were in there. And I can tell you, off the Richter scale. So for someone like, I came into university when I was 21, and then by the second year of my degree, I had traveled now and was living in a country for the first time in my life and looking at the end of pipe for a country that has so many people in a high, very high density. It was a catalytic moment for change for me. It was like, I've got to do something about this. But I thought at that time, the best thing I could do was continue to learn, continue to study, continue to focus on addressing end of pipe until I did learn about the circular economy. And then for me, I could not be contented by just putting those Band-Aid type approaches on a big problem.
Yeah. You've got to the source of it, the root cause of it, and then looking at solutions on how can we shift the whole world here. So I can see that was a real pivotal moment. But for our listeners, Ashleigh, like we're talking about that, take, make, dispose, end of pipe waste situation. And sometimes we don't see it, in our day-to-day life touring around, we don't see it, but you went and saw it. And I guess you described for our listeners there what is happening in many countries. And I guess there's also outcomes in all countries with this massively. But for our listeners that don't know, Ashleigh, what is the difference between the end of pipe style approach and the circular economy?
I think that's such a good question. And I mean, just to pick up on one of your points, I think I want a listener to understand, waste is out of sight, out of mind. But if we just reframe the way we see the world, everything right now in the room I'm sitting in, the room you're sitting in, at some point in our current economy will end up what we would class as waste. It's everywhere. It's everything. It's not just what you put in that bin. And that's how our society and how we manage materials today. So it's really problematic. So when we talk about today's linear economy, it's about extracting virgin resources, which we then make into products that break. We do that to stimulate economic growth. So it's all about mass production and scale and mass consumption. Now, that particular part of this current economy is where we see the massive externalities, the negative externalities of climate change, impact to global warming, modern slavery, because when we're producing things at mass scale, we're moving into markets that are cheaper because the human labor is quite expensive. So of course, Asia becomes the manufacturing base of the world, and we're not doing it here in Australia. And of course, when we want to get away with things at scale, we do it in those markets as well because regulations aren't as strict as countries such as Australia again. So big externalities that arise. But because we're making products to break because we want you to buy more to stimulate our economic growth, then we get a lot of waste. So the majority of what we put into our global economy, actually 91% of all raw materials that come into our economy end up as waste.
Wow, 91%.
91%. And what I want to say to people is, so that's our current linear economy. Imagine now if we captured the value of that 91%. What we could be, how robust our societies could be, resilient, and prosperous if we were actually valuing materials holistically. Now, to talk about what the circular economy is and how it differs from that linear take, make, waste model, the circular economy is an economic performance-based model. It's designed, and that's a really key word I want to focus here on, it's designed to be restorative and regenerative. And those two key words are used because this model focuses on what we would call biological materials. So things like cotton, food, and wood, they're biological materials. They need to be returned to regenerate our natural systems. So that's where that regenerative aspect of this model comes in. So anything that's of that nature, it needs to go back to things like our soils to regenerate them, which then provide renewable resources back into the economy. Now, the restorative part, that's what we talk about hard durables, things like steel, any of our metals, our crude oil-based plastics, long-lived products or materials. That's when we look at all of the R's, reuse, manufactured, but in the very last resort, recycling. It is the option of last resort. And I really want to highlight that because people are like, I know what circular economy is. It's recycling on steroids. And it's not, it really has nothing to do with that. So the circular economy is an economic performance-based model that is designed to be restorative and regenerative. It has three key principles which are really easy and logical. First, design out waste and pollution. So we're not dealing with waste at end of pipe here, we're designing it out through better processes. Keep products and materials at their highest value for as long as possible. We no longer want to make things to break, we want to build things to last and have a new commercial strategy to support that. Last is to regenerate natural systems. Look, we've gone so far beyond, an approach to do less bad. We actually need to do more good. And for us, a linear economy is extractive. We take more than we ever give back to our natural environment. Sustainability, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. Look, we'll take this and we'll give that back. We're doing good. We can't do that anymore. It's no longer good enough. We have to be restorative and regenerative, which is the circular economy model. I know that was a long explanation, but I really just wanted to unpack some of that for the listeners.
Oh, Ashleigh, that was brilliant. Really well described. So you've got the two sides of it, which is the biological and the restorative. And then you've got the three key elements you spoke about there, which was, the reduce, reuse, and sustain, and then also the recycle. But the recycle, it's interesting that you say that's the last thing. Why is recycle the last thing you should think to, Ashleigh, with it really when it comes to that side of things?
Because when we recycle materials, they inherently lose value. And when we want to focus on the R's, or the innermost loops of a butterfly diagram, which is part of our circular economic model, which seeks to have reuse, sharing, like maximum utilization of a resource. When we need to put more resources in to bring something back to a state, and in this case of recycling, it's often a lower quality state, it's the option of last resort because it's taking more again from the system. When that product, if designed right, especially because it's a hard durable, should be in use for a very long time. And we can find strategies like, say, modularity or designing things for remanufacture that make things, you can just change a component, not the whole product. Right now we're in a society where it's kind of just mass flow one way. We put something in a bin, and that's actually not recycling at that point. A product's not recycled until it's back in the system.
Yeah, it's a really neat concept. And I actually saw a company do this back in the early noughties quite well. There's a company called Datamax. They designed a very industrial, it was an industrial barcode printer, for labeling in a factory or a warehouse. They made it modular. They made it solid out of aluminium, which is, and basically I still see them about the industry everywhere. The things do not break. And if something does break, it's plug and play by the operator to be able to get it running again. Everything's got like locking pins, so you can't get it wrong. When you put the part back in, you have it right.
Yeah.
So it was
smart design.
Smart design. I don't know if it was done for the circular economy back then, but it's...
No, but I think that you bring up a really key point. People will say, well, my great-grandparents, did this. They built things to last. They had a strong focus on community, and they certainly never wasted a thing. Indigenous cultures certainly have practiced the philosophy of a circular economy, living in harmony with the natural world for millennia. And also, you're right, there are so many companies, and whether they called it efficiency or effectiveness or just better way to operate, that have been practicing the circular economy or elements of it for quite a long time. It's now, how do we bring modern day understanding of societies and bring in new technologies coupled with this new economic model and paradigm to actually achieve systemic change?
Yeah, look, it's so powerful when you think about it, because I was just thinking, Ashleigh, I think their driver was largely customer experience. How can I make it so easy and fast and simple for anyone to keep this thing running and reduce their impact of cost ongoing? And you can get so many win-wins when you start thinking this way, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the higher and more elevated thinking we need. This is not about a waste management solution. It's not, and it should be driven by the question on how can we provide, what value do we want to provide, and work from there. And what you'll find is you will inadvertently design out waste. Your product will last longer. It'll have greater customer and sustained relationships with customers and your markets. And somehow through there, you'll probably consider, how you regenerate the natural system, whether that starts to be you're getting renewable energy into your operations, whether you're redirecting some of your materials to go where they need to go when they do reach end of first use. It's a fundamentally different way to think about it and the questions we ask ourselves. So I really like that you kind of brought up these points, and it's directing people to think about that.
Yeah, the examples are everywhere out there, aren't they? It's just that innovation piece to really drive it forward, which I'm keen to go into now, Ashleigh, is what approaches have you seen really work for organisations looking to go from a more linear to a more circular approach?
I think, or to bring it back to what we were just touching on, first of all, it's got to start with people. And I think it's got to be people-led, and it's got to sit at the heart of a business, not sit on the periphery of a business. So to do it well, I think you are, first of all, bringing it in where it needs to sit. And often for us, that's strategy or strategic parts of operations and those teams that are associated. And then bringing in a diversity of stakeholders or divisions across a business, because diversity is such a powerful tool to facilitate change toward a circular economy. So it's at the heart of business. You've got a diverse team working on it, and you're starting to form your baseline. And this is so important because a lot of organizations and supply chains have become so long and complex that we just don't really understand our cumulative impact nor contribution in any sort of key metrics. We probably know our profit and loss, but we don't know much else. We probably don't even know our entire supply chain and who's in it. So for me, it's about how do we form that baseline understanding about our operation and our supply chains? And then with that baseline understanding, how do we start asking questions about how do we create value and use the principles and business models of a circular economy to facilitate that outcome? Now, I think a lot of organizations, some of which we're working with in the mining and resources sector, are doing just that, going to the heart of how they operate and asking questions like, will we exist in 50 years? And if we do, what do we want to be contributing? And I think that's allowing people to fundamentally rethink core purpose and how to, with a circular economy, at its heart in the thinking, how do we make sure we're contributing value, we're restoring and we're regenerating?
Yeah, that's really powerful. Actually, I love how you say start with strategy and then rapidly move on to people, because without it, you're not going to have that alignment and motion forward. Go to enterpriseexcellencepodcast.com/downloads to get hold of a simple work instruction on strategy and cultural deployment, the steps to engage everyone in your organization in strategic and cultural planning and execution, creating a connected, agile organization. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast to help others gain insights and create a better future. Let's get back into the episode. Actually, you touched on something there too about organizations not being around in the future. There's a potential that many aren't if they don't shift. And it made me think of Clay Christensen. He's a Harvard professor who wrote a book on jobs to be done, which was really about getting to the purpose of what my product does. I guess if people as part of this can understand what their product actually does for a customer, you can rethink it, can't you?
Yes.
Because I'm thinking like a lot of the mining companies, they're mining, but what's the result? They're actually providing systems and outcomes for people to create infrastructure and structures and
shelter, the Maslow hierarchy of needs. I find, we work where we most need to work. And that sector certainly is a place where we need to work in terms of bringing the circular economy, understanding and supporting and empowering those organizations to facilitate change, drive more value. But if you're a company, say like a Rio Tinto or a BHP, you have so much commodity output, what you actually put into the global marketplace. The jobs to be done, they are numerous, and the value created is so vast that it's not even understood at this point. Those supply chains are so big and they are so long and complex, and they almost touch every corner of the planet. For me, I don't see those industries as extractive. I see them as a development industry. Yeah. None of us can decouple ourselves from mining. It's everywhere, and it's provided us with a lot of our fundamental needs as beings. But it does and has come at a substantive cost. So the question is, how do we address that? Will this, and if in addressing it, will they still exist in the way they exist today? And what is the value we're actually creating, and how do we communicate that? Or how do we be more deliberate about that? Because to be honest, those metals do a fundamental job, and many jobs, which are brilliant and critically needed. But how do we broaden that and understand that in a more holistic sense? Because we don't and haven't fully grasped it yet. And that industry has an incredibly poor understanding amongst everyday citizens and a very bad reputation. Although I think people are largely misinformed.
Yeah. Well, I think and you and I know that a lot of the big miners are going this way, and they're on this journey. And, if a mining company can go there and they're starting to move actively in that path, and I know of petrochemical companies doing it and moving that way. Everyone can go that way. Some of those guys have the biggest challenges to shift into that new economy of the future, don't they? But what stops organizations doing it? What have you seen that really can be a roadblock to a company moving forward and starting to make progress towards a circular economy?
I think because we're fundamentally going to be asking tough questions, they make people feel uncomfortable, and I think they also are so fundamental that it does incite a little bit of fear. If about identity, there's a little bit of an identity crisis. If we're not that, then what are we? And that shift, that little middle part, that where we provoke the question, we support and empower capability building, to actually realizing an answer to one of those questions, is where there might be a bit of a, this is really nice, oh, we can't do it, we're at the tipping point, it's too much, you're not going to jump off that cliff. But so I think it's a very human-centered, does my identity carry me through this narrative? Do I see myself in it? Do my skills translate? Am I still valuable in that narrative? And I think for people, and I will say again, maybe draw it to a mining, because it's very relevant to Australia. Coal miners, for example, that's, a lot of them are multi-generational, and they only have identified with being a coal miner. So again, it comes to this identity. When we start asking new questions, people will talk about the just transition and all of these words. But if you're a coal miner and someone says, learn how to do hydrogen, you've got to make sure that someone's identity is carried through that narrative, that they see themselves there, that they feel like they can contribute there. Because as beings, I think we need to understand how we're contributing. Because I think if we don't, it often cause quite a few bad externalities in our own mental and well-being, but also that in our communities and societies. It's not as easy as just transition. There's people at the heart of this, and people will be what makes or breaks any one type of transformational transition.
Yeah. It's such a powerful example, isn't it? Because it's differentiating yourself from physically what you do day to day. Okay, I mine coal, to no, I create energy. Okay, so what's the energy for the future? Okay, how do I shift to be creating energy? Because that's what every coal miner, my great grandfather was a coal miner, great grandfather. He was an energy creator.
I know, and I think, and we can use those words, and I love that framing, but it's making sure that the people, the people at the heart of that identify with that framing. And if they don't, how do we support them to find an identity in this new trajectory? Because there is one, and I'm not disputing we need to go there, but we won't get there is the fundamental point here. We will not get there, and it's one of the biggest barriers to your question. Is we need to actually take people on the journey with us, which means we need to listen, and we need to actually hear them when they're talking to us through listening, and respond in line with that to make sure the solutions or the narrative that gets built is inclusive and representative and respective of diversity, because it often hasn't been.
Yeah. Well, actually, that brings another great element that you've been talking about. Like you mentioned earlier, the strategic bit, and how an organization really needs to put this at the heart of their strategic path and the future for themselves, which it's going to happen. So the ones that do will evolve well. But then there's the other part then, that we need to show empathy to all our people and involve our people, and then help develop them and help them grow so that they can make the transition. Yeah.
I think the way we like to work with organizations is from the cleaning contractors through to the boardroom. And people might say, why aren't you just working with the executive and building out the strategy? Because that won't work. In my view, as successfully. You might get some success, but I think if you're doing and designing systems-based outcomes, you need to speak to all of the people that represent an operation or a system, as many as you possibly can, within any constraints set by a scope of work or project. But for us, we're like, diversity is at the heart. If it means I need to make an extra 50 phone calls or do interviews, I will. If it means I need to go literally to the coalface, I will, because it has to have empathy at its heart. We need to respect diversity and foster it. And we need to make sure that we build a narrative that's inclusive, because then we're actually going to get systems change. Because again, back to the question before, which is, why do things fail? It's because someone will go, oh, there's this circular economy thing. We need to get out, we need to get on top of this. So they'll give a massive workload often to one person that's employed to be the sustainability leader for a company.
Yeah.
And then and then that person might have a baby, or, they might move jobs, and the whole thing can fall over, and there's a lack of continuity. So I just think it's got to be systemic, foster diversity and support it, and build a narrative that's inclusive with empathy considered in all work that's done.
I can see with what you're saying, Ashley, that you'd end up with a strategic plan and direction, vision, and everything that goes with it that's owned by all leadership. And then if that team is skilled at cascading that and involving everyone in the journey, you're going to have a whole organization that then is at least shown empathy and involved and starting to understand more through that process, I'm guessing too.
Everyone's empowered, because every interaction we seek to have, and again, I'm just talking from my own respective experience and approach of how we work, every time we interact with someone, it's about empowering them with understanding of what it is the circular economy can offer them, the organization that they work, their community, that broader narrative. And when they understand that, then they are empowered to start to do something with that knowledge, whether it's sharing that to one of their colleagues saying, hey, I just had this interview, we're doing this project. And what we often find is, we might be re-engaged, or the companies will come back to us and say, hey, look what we've done, with this they're proud of themselves. And again, it might be the operational team that actually feel like they were heard for the first time, that I felt like the executive was really listening, and the strategies respecting what they feel is valuable for the organization, like their on the ground skills and visibility to change is really heard. And, we often find that then the projects that result are both strategic and practical operational projects. So again, there's action that results out of core strategy at the senior level, and also at the way, the actual practical applied teams or contractors working on the ground in different organizations and different markets.
Yeah, that's powerful. You end up the whole organism moving forward and starting to improve in this way.
Which is what we need. It's what we need.
Yeah, that's awesome. Ashley, what's your vision for the future? Like I can, you're so passionate, you're so driven, and I know you and the whole Choreo team are really making a big difference. But where do you look to the future now? What's your vision?
That's a really big question, and one I'm always grappling with. I ask myself every day, where am I best placed? Where am I best placed? I have the deepest of desires to contribute and to just make sure that all human beings know that they're valued, and all beings, other species, of course. And it's a big thing to think about. What is that future vision? Of course, I want to see us change from this very destructive linear economy. It's affecting all of us, and what you can look around Australia and go, hey, well, I think it's not so bad. It is pretty bad. But it's where we export lots of the problems so you don't see them. It's also not sustainable in the long term. And if you come back to anything out of this conversation, remembering we're losing 91% of all value we're introducing into our economy on 91% of those materials. So for me, it would be a full value capture of those materials in the first instance, driven through the principles of the circular economy, and also just addressing the major challenges that are arising through the way we operate today, and making sure as we move to address these things that it has empathy, diversity, and inclusivity as we build this new narrative, because everybody needs to get involved with this transition or transformation towards circularity, because it's not, when we talk about the economy, people feel like it's separate to them, almost like they're in the fishbowl, and but it's not. Where we are, what makes the economy, our single transactions every day. So I think people have this power, and I'd love to see us as a future vision transition toward a circular economy with the integrity of all that stands for, truly.
Yeah, that's a really powerful statement you made there, Ashley, too, that, often we look at the economy and we go, oh, that's the Reserve Bank, that's the government. But really, like you said, the economy is what we choose to put our money towards every single day. And we can make a difference and change right now just by choosing to put our money to something that's more circular.
But just ask questions. Start asking questions of where you buy things from, of your local member. There's so many things we can do. Where's your super being invested? We have so much money stored up in our super that's so powerful if redirected. And look, things are changing, but as each one of us has this massive power, I believe in the power of the individual and the power of the collective. I think if we all started just just doing little things every day, it would catalyze such a change. And the economy, we are part of that economy, every single one of us. And I think it's not separate to you. If you don't understand it, seek to understand it, and then look at a different way we could start to do things. And what are the practical ways you can participate? We need a participatory economy.
We can all make a difference. It's neat.
Correct.
And create a better future.
Yeah.
Ashleigh, one thing we're doing now with the podcast, the Enterprise Excellence podcast, is providing a 2-minute tip video release also. It's just for those people that are time poor and don't have a chance to listen to a 30, 40-minute podcast. But on your area of expertise, Ashleigh, what would be your Enterprise Excellence 2-minute tip?
I'll probably be quicker than 2 minutes. So if you've never heard of the circular economy, or you've heard about it in the context of it's better recycling or better waste management, what I want to share with you is that it's about the economy. It's an economic model. And there's 3 key principles, and I'd love you to reframe them as questions for your organization, for your home life, for your community, or whether your kids' school, which are: how can we design out waste and pollution? How can we keep products and materials at their highest value for as long as possible? And how can we regenerate in a natural system? I think if you had those 3 principles reframed as questions, that will make sure that you're part of this new economy that we're trying to create, which is all about circularity, circulation of value versus extraction of value.
Yeah, that's a great tip. That's a great tip. If we ask ourselves those 3 questions every day with everything we're doing, we'll make the journey.
Yes.
Ashleigh, what have you learned recently? Like, you've given our listeners a lot of insights and new knowledge, but what have you learned recently in your area of expertise that you didn't know before? What's been a recent insight?
Actually, it was something that come up the other day, and then I'm always a student of the circular economy. People refer to me as an expert, but I'm a student, and I always will be. I'm always learning here, and I think to have a nice circle pun, there's no end to a circle, similar to this journey on, trying to implement the circular economy model. So something I learned the other day was actually through Ken, and we were talking about the monetary system, because a lot of the focus on the circular economy is very much related to materials and materials management, or managing the stocks and flows that we have in a global economy. And what Ken was sharing with me is that we can't have a circular economy if we have a linear extractive economy for materials. We need to make sure the monetary or the financial systems that we have also move away from extraction. So what we mean by that is, it's about not driving investment into fixed assets, but driving investment into the productive economy, the people actually working and doing things. Because where our money goes right now is like, I'll invest in that large scale development and I'll extract rents from that, and I'll get rich in my sleep, versus I want to support, new business, new manufacturers, new technologies coming into the market, productive things that are really going to change stuff. If our money's sunk in fixed assets and we're making money off rent, it's extremely extractive and it's not value creating money. So in a circular model, we very much need to stimulate and create value through driving money into production.
Yeah, that's
of different goods, assets, technologies. Yeah, so that, for Ken and I, we're really trying to unpack, how do we deliver that message to the everyday person? And of course, lots of us like to buy a home and have, friend. It's a way we've been able to have and accrue wealth. So it's how do we build a narrative that doesn't threaten that or scare that, but show different ways of doing things that can build wealth but create additional value to the society, to our societies.
Yeah, and actually, this podcast is so much about that. It's about creating a better future economically, environmentally, and socially. But you think about it, like, if we in Australia, like, I see manufacturers that can compete here. We can make carpet here, and we can do it competitively. Enterprise excellence needed. You need to be slick. You need to be strategically aligned. You've got to be good. But that's why this podcast has come about, is to share this knowledge all over the world. But particularly, I've got a passion about Australia with being based here. And boy, man, if we could get more people investing in manufacturing and doing it very well, that's a better future.
We're so privileged here with the money that we have in our institutional funds, our super funds, billions and billions of dollars that is often going into fixed assets, not productive business. And I think if we could just redirect like 2% of that, it would be so powerful. And you're very right. We have phenomenal companies in our market that can compete on a global stage. Evolve Group, fantastic advanced manufacturer led by a brilliant team, that are competing with the Chinese manufacturers. We should foster that in every way we possibly can. I love that company, and there's so many others, but I think we need to look at the monetary system as well as the materials and just be smarter with how we want to create value. That's the heart of this whole dialogue, is value creation, and how do we participate in doing that.
Yeah. And just the reduction in supply chains that would give us, and also the jobs it would create, and all the other flow-on benefits is just massive.
Yeah.
Ashleigh, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and everything you do to help us create a better future. How can people reach out to you and get in touch and learn more or connect?
Yeah, we love when people reach out, by the way, with all different kinds of ideas or questions. So please don't feel like I'm not approachable. I certainly am. So the best way you can follow what we're doing as a company, but also individually, on LinkedIn. So you can look at my profile, Ashleigh Morris, on LinkedIn, and message me through there. But equally, I'm very happy, Brad, for people to look up my email. But our website is www.coreo.com.au. So if you want to check out our website, our contact information is there as well. Feel free to email, check me out on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect.
Thanks so much, Ashleigh. It's been a pleasure. And thank you for all you're going to do in the future. I can see that you're going to help our planet go to good places.
Yeah, that's the goal. Thanks for having me.
Cheers, Ashleigh. Bye for now. What a great episode. Remember, you can go to our website, enterpriseexcellencepodcast.com/downloads, to get hold of a simple work instruction on strategy and cultural deployment, the steps to engage everyone in your organisation in strategic and cultural planning, execution, and create a connected, agile organisation. There were 2 key takeaways for me from this episode: design, maintain, regenerate, and secondly, involve everyone in planning and execution. The first key takeaway links back to Ashleigh's 2-minute tip, which I found so powerful for all of us to consider in helping move our world to a more circular, sustainable future. How do we design out waste and pollution, maintain products at their highest value for as long as possible, which links back to the way we design products in the first place? And how do we help regenerate our natural system? Wouldn't it be a wonderful, sustainable world where our economy is designed with no waste or pollution, products and services are maintained at a high level of value for a long time, with a financial approach to suit this, and we all regenerate the natural world? The second key takeaway, involve everyone in planning and execution, is such a common topic on this podcast. So many of our world's experts who come on this show to discuss enterprise excellence raise this as a key topic in achieving sustainable change and excellence. Start with creating a plan, involve others and gain feedback at all levels, and make adjustments. Then help others in your organisation form their aligned plans and approaches to execute them in a way that creates a connected organisational organism. An organisational system that can adjust and move quickly as one to create a better future. Thanks again, Ashleigh. Really appreciate your time and knowledge. Bye for now.